Thank you all for participating in this event in spite of the daunting heat outside, which I think the weather has changed right now. I must say I look forward to similar heat generated inside this auditorium today, perhaps. However, one might add not as much heat as gets generated in one of Arnab Goswami's debates. Now let's get down to the business of the day. As we had observed yesterday, in India, nowadays it would be correct to say we are on the verge of anticipation. Gaining a competitive edge in a tough selling environment is going to be crucial. The competitive edge will need to be sharpened by achieving smoother operating processes. Hence our theme for this two-day conclave, gaining competitive edge with integrated and packaging and supply chain processes. In this context, yesterday we were discussing the need of harmonizing packaging design, productivity and secondary packaging in order to achieve better business results. We had some wonderful presentations and discussions on the various challenges to be dealt with in order to have packaging that can help to streamline, not create bottlenecks in business operations. In our session on pack design and its role in the logistics ecosystem, Mr. Venkatraman, Mr. Amitabh Kumar, Mr. Harveer Sani and Sandeep Bhargav and H.S. Arun brought out the various perspectives of design that can have a positive or negative impact on operations. In our session on automation as a tool to manage operational complexity, Mr. Sivaram, Mr. Samir Gandhi, Mr. Binu Thomas, Mr. Chandraprakash and Mr. Anup Vadhwa opened up our imaginations to the world of possibilities with the help of automation, robotics and machines capable of talking to each other. In our session on improved end-of-line efficiency, Mr. Santosh Tandon, Mr. Prabhudas Das Gupta, Mr. Asif Kazmi, Mr. P.S. Krishnan generated a lot of discussion on the need for integrated and mechanized end-of-line operations, instead of current trend of having so much manpower. As someone said that there were more manpower on the biscuit line than biscuits. The debate was also generated whether there is a real need to have track and trace on secondary packaging and what is the most cost-effective way to achieve counterfeit protection. We all agreed that packaging design cannot exist in isolation or purely in the service of marketing needs. Competitive packaging and shelf display in modern retail alone cannot help to build winning products unless backed by a resilient, efficient supply chain. In other words, packaging and shelf display alone cannot be just market-driven and must find their place in the entire complex ecosystem of high-speed production, regulation, and distribution logistics. Packaging must be designed not only with the consumer in mind, but also its implication in production, freight, and handling. The supply chain must learn to go beyond the old adage of right product at the right place to being adaptive enough to sense and realign market focus at all times. To put all this another way, while packaging itself may need to be innovative and market-driven, in an environment of brand volatility and slow market growth, the entire logistics and supply chain around it also needs to be value-driven or lean and cost-efficient. To add to the complexity, online retail is making huge strides in India too and poses its own unique set of challenges for packaging and supply. I'm reminded of a news item which I saw recently. In Korea, for the first time in the world, grocery shoppers can experience a vast virtual store. They just have to browse shopping aisles, stocked and packaged merchandise displayed on touch screens, and add them to a virtual cart. And presto, at the end of the virtual shopping tour, the shopper can pick up the actual goods selected by her, ready to go. To me, this news represents a huge stride in retail display, packaging, and a very powerful supply chain. I'm sure everyone has experienced these issues from their own perspective and would like to share knowledge or raise queries that would take us to a higher understanding of the subject. For this afternoon, we have planned 4 discussion sessions of 45 minutes each. Each of these will feature aspects of the modern supply chain, and from integrated end of line to cold chain to track and trace to state-of-art 360-degree visibility supply chains. In the end, we have a special presentation on sustainability, as we know by now in packaging that less packaging is good packaging. To provide a perfect backdrop for our discussions on supply chain, we have invited Mr. Atrash Aman of Home TV18, which we all know is a household name in providing an alternate retail shopping platform that has been hugely successful. I'd like to invite Mr. Atrash Aman to share his experience and insights in what goes into developing a successful supply chain or TV or online retail, and what are its implications expected to be going forward, especially for packaging, productivity, handling, warehousing, and traditional retail. Mr. Atrash Aman. Mr. Atrash is the Chief Customer Officer and Head of Operations TV18 HomeShop Network. Prior to HomeShop, he was the Chief Operating Officer and Business Head for HomeShop 18's mobile business since March 2012. Mr. Aman joined the HomeShop 18 in March 2007 as Vice President of Sales and Marketing, and in 2011 became Director, Marketing and Strategy. Prior to that, he was with Bharti Airtel in various capacities between December 2003 and 2007. His last assignment at Bharti was as Vice President and Business Head for Media and Services. Between 1997 and 2000, he worked at McCann Erickson in the role of Strategic Planner and in Account Management. He worked at Mudra between 1995-97. Between 1993-95, he worked with TCS and in Management Consultancy Division. He holds an honors degree in economics from the University of Delhi and an MBA from Faculty of Management Studies. So I'd like to invite him to share his perspective on what happens in TV retail or alternate shopping platforms, and what is happening to the supply chain in these sort of a situation. That's right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me here. Before I get started, just a quick view on what we call digital commerce. Digital commerce is actually commerce that happens or shopping that happens via media. HomeShop 18 is a business that started about 7 years ago, roughly around the time that I and a few others sort of got together and got started. We innovated in a number of different ways. First, by actually launching the country's first 24-hour shopping channel. Thereafter, we entered internet retail, and about a year and a half ago, we actually pioneered mobile shopping. We launched our first mobile commerce applications and mobile commerce site. In the 7 years, there's been a tremendous transformation that we've seen, and what we also find is that digital commerce itself is transformational. It calls for a slightly different way of thinking when it comes to supply chain, when it comes to how things are done. And I'll sort of touch upon that when we go along my presentation. What I'm going to sort of first explain to you is, is that the retail landscape is undergoing a change. Forever we've actually, if you go to the extreme left, you'll see, the typical shop that sells you kapda, and you'll find it in every shop, in every market, all across the country. There's a certain profile of this, largely unorganized, and this is the sort of stuff that is available to consumers all across the country fairly easily. In the center, what we see is what we've actually observed in the last 15 years, which is organized retail. The big bazaars of the world, They've actually, Shoppers Stop, Big Bazaar, Lifestyle, Reliance Retail, Aditya Birla Retail, Bharti Retail, and so on. This is available anywhere from 40 to 50 cities. So this format of retail is accessible to consumers in about 40, 50 cities. And the development of these kind of, or this format enabled a certain sort of sophisticated shopping experience for customers. What also would happen traditionally is a lot of consumers from different parts of the country would actually travel into these 40, 50 cities when they needed to buy something. Much like before the advent of organized retail, a lot of us would wait for people to go abroad and get us stuff that we wanted, the brands that we wanted. The most recent sort of change that we've seen is with digital commerce. And like I said, digital commerce is commerce accessed through media, whether it's television, internet, or mobile. Now, obviously, the first format is the oldest, and that's really, when we talk about retail, that's what retail has been and is pretty much for most Indians. That's about 460 billion, growing at 5%. Organized retail, roughly about 40 billion, growing at 13, 14, 15%. And then you have digital commerce, which has grown to about 4 billion, probably 5 billion now, and growing at 100% year on year. However, and incidentally, digital commerce is all over news. You can't pick up any newspaper or watch any channel without sort of, encountering some story about one of the celebrated brands in this space. Despite this size, this scale, and this growth, it's important to understand where we are. And this is a fairly well-known, well-understood consumer diffusion graph. This is how new categories actually evolve. Very early on, the innovative consumers actually adopt the category. In their wake, and from their experiences, the next bunch of consumers get in. That's what you call the early adopters. The numbers that you see there, this is based on data that people have studied in different parts of the world. And then the early majority, late majority, and then laggards. Digital commerce is here. So 4 billion, 100% growth, this is where we are. We're still with the early adopters. Just about 3 years back, the penetration levels were very low. You had the innovators, the very early kids who were taking to this category and purchasing. Penetration is less than 10%. In a typical forum where there would be a larger audience, if I ask people to raise their hands if they'd ever actually experienced it, very few people would still raise their hands to say they've actually transacted in a city like Delhi. And this is the normal growth curve of all successful categories. It relates to the chart which I showed a little while back. Now, the thing is that we're still at a very early stage. On this growth curve, we haven't really hit the vertical growth path. We are here. It's still a very young industry. I think the media space is more than the size of the industry in some senses. And I sort of, from my experience with telecom, I can sort of relate this to the times, 2000, 2001, when telecom pretty much meant BSNL, MTNL. But the growth was ahead of us. The growth was ahead of the telecom sector. And with a set of changes that occurred there, we pretty much had a 30-40% quarter-on-quarter growth for several years thereafter. So this is where we are with digital commerce. It's important for all of us to understand why this basic fact, because there are a few things I'm going to tell you as we go along that are important to recognize as the challenges that we face in the digital commerce industry. So why does it work for consumers? What is in it for them when it comes to digital commerce? First and foremost, digital commerce means better value. People have adopted e-commerce, mobile commerce, television shopping because they get better value. They find products cheaper. The reason they find them cheaper is because this is direct to home. So layers of intermediaries actually get cut out. Product moves directly from a warehouse to the customer. Second, it is convenient. You don't have to actually, in a city like Delhi, sort of, get out in this heat, deal with all kinds of traffic, pay $100 for parking increasingly now, and it's getting more expensive. It's just convenient. Third, with that convenience comes choice. And more importantly, just to sort of go back to the first slide that I showed you, this choice is available to a consumer anywhere in the country. You could be practically anywhere in the country and you'd be able to buy the brand that you want, get the color that you like, of the size that fits you, anywhere in the country. It works for them. But for the larger majority, it's still a question mark. There is no touch and feel. I'm not walking into a store trying on a shirt. I'm not, weighing the steel ka bartan that, it's what I think it should be. So there's doubt and uncertainty. What I see, would I get it? Will I get it on time? Will it come in fine packing, not damaged? Obvious concerns, obvious questions. And let me remind you, we are still a young industry. So these and many other questions are valid questions that the larger majority would take time to come to terms with. But these are important questions, and these are the questions that when we when we think about supply chain and packaging, we need to start thinking about. Just some quick sort of facts. The customer does indeed suffer, and we know this. We deliver in something like 1,000 cities, about 7,000-8,000 pin codes. And when I use these terms and these numbers I'm talking about, we deliver and we collect cash. These are cash and delivery transactions. Where it comes to post-paid, which means for consumers who pay by credit cards, we deliver anywhere in the country. We cover every damn pin code there is to cover across the country. But those consumers, they experience a delay 20 to 25% of the times. Unfortunately, there is a damage in 4% of the times, 4% of the cases. And there is pilferage along the way in almost 1%. Now add it all together, it is a challenge. 1 in 3 consumers potentially is facing one or the other problem. And the supply chain and the vendors that sort of help us put our packaging together need to be cognizant of this. And we'll see why some of these things are still happening, because a nascent industry does not exist in a vacuum. We don't exist in a silo. We work with vendors, we work with courier partners, we work with packaging partners, we work with warehousing partners, and so on. And all of these different entities in the supply chain need to recognize and understand this consumer. And again, we'll see why this is still nascent, why it's still developing. So let's just see how logistics worked before online commerce occurred, how it worked for retail. This was a one-way bulk movement, box in, box out. So you'd load a truck with maybe 50 boxes, move it from a factory to a warehouse, and from a warehouse to a store. What the consumer experience is some of the things that Mr. Manchanda just spoke of, those finely displayed items that they would walk into a store, pick up, and walk home with. But that's not how digital commerce works. It's not one way, it's not bulk, it is different. This is how it works. So it is direct to consumer, but for that direct to consumer to occur, all of this needs to work. So it moves from the warehouse to a courier's sorting hub. From the sorting hub, it goes into an aircraft, and gets to a destination hub where it again gets sorted, and then it is out for delivery with a courier boy on a bike, typically, with a fairly heavy load on his back. It goes to the consumer's doorstep, and I've taken a typical example of cash on delivery. It could get delivered, cash collected, or the customer may refuse at the last moment to say, I've changed my mind, please take it back. It needs to go back to the destination hub. Or it may reach the consumer's doorstep, the consumer may not be at home. Or the consumer may not have the cash ready to make the payment and may ask for the courier to come again. And then we start talking about new terminology. We call it NDR. NDR is nothing but a report that we get from a courier which says this is your non-delivery report for the day. And we need to then call up the customer and try and understand whether the consumer is truly interested or not interested, whether the consumer is going to be able to get the cash ready by a particular time. Sometimes the consumer may say, listen, I placed the order on 24th, I thought you're going to deliver it on the 30th, which is when I get my salary, but I haven't got my salary, so you wait for 3 days. So, because it reached on the 27th. So we have to tell the courier partner to hold the shipment. Now that obviously has an impact on the courier partner's operations in terms of the space that they have. The local destination branch can only have so much space. So imagine if 30% of our consumers turn around and say, hold the shipment today, and another 30% do the same tomorrow. So there are challenges and they need to be accounted for. The key point here is that this is a direct-to-consumer business. It's not bulk movement. It is one shipment that needs to reach the consumer. And the consumer may have bought it for himself or herself, or may have bought it to gift somebody, and needs that shipment to reach in pristine condition in time. Sorry. It is a mixed load typically. So what happens is pretty much B2B. So it could be a warehouse which is of a single product. It could be a warehouse which is multi-product, multi-vendor, which means the warehousing itself needs to actually cater to hundreds and thousands of different SKUs. They're typically 3PLs. So the new rule book is you got to be customer focused. You need to recognize this is a B2C game. It is different. It is still lucrative, very lucrative, but it is B2C. It's time to recognize that you don't move to a schedule, that on the 19th, the shipment needs to be picked up from a factory and delivered on the 24th to a distribution center somewhere. The consumer would seek either very fast delivery or would seek delivery on a particular date. And we need to be adapting to this change. The consumer wants to know where the shipment is, because the consumer wants to be able to plan his or her life. Which means, again, you need to now start thinking of making investments in technology at the last mile. The courier boy, is he carrying a mobile scanner? Is he going to be able to get the customer to actually, make a credit card payment at the last moment because he or she doesn't have cash but can pay using a credit card? So a fair amount of change that needs to happen from B2B to B2C. It's different. Obviously, in itself, when you think of packaging, the norms aren't very different, the materials aren't very different, but these need to happen at an atomistic scale. You need to recognize the fact that it's multi-product, multi-size, multi-weight shipments that are moving. They're going to be taken to a cargo terminal at the airport where it is going to be handled the way it's going to be handled. That's another piece of challenge because a lot of damages happen at that point. So drop tests, ensuring that even if that iPhone pack is robust, it's nicely tightly packed, you still need to make it safe enough that the packaging itself doesn't get damaged. The basic packaging must not get damaged, because you may want to actually gift it to someone and you don't want to either take the phone out and give it, or give a nice pair of shoes. You may be spending 6,000, 7,000 bucks on a nice pair of shoes. You want it to arrive in a neat condition. So obviously bubble wraps, shrink wraps, tamper proofs, all of these need to happen, and we need to do it, and we have to do it, otherwise we're not serving our customer. And the challenge for us, we have to do all of this, and we have to deliver the product to the customer without collecting any shipping charges. And while we all believe that Indian consumer is value conscious, he wants to make that extra buck, the truth is that even in the US, sales pick up when it is free shipping. It's an incredible pull for the consumer, because the consumer doesn't believe that paying parking charges in a mall is akin to shipping charges, for example. And let me give you an example of what happens here. Again, just to take the iPhone 5 example again. So, nice, neat little box in a warehouse, probably weighs less than 500 grams, would cost us, if we shipped it as is, maybe 30 bucks, right? Let's see what happens. Now that needs to be protected with some bit of additional cover, additional packing. More often than not, it will move into the next weight bracket. And unfortunately, it moves in step function. So from 500 it goes to 1 kg, from 1 kg it goes to 1.5 kg. So it's not going to be 700 grams. If it's moved from, let's say, 450 grams to 700 grams, we'll still pay for a kg. The cost of shipment jumps to 60 bucks. And the additional cost of packaging comes in. So there's almost a 200% inflation in just that one cost line item. Now, why is this important? Because, let me go back. Digital commerce is equal to great value. This is ingrained in the consumer's mind. And this has to be delivered, and it has to be delivered consistently. So it's critical for each element of the supply chain to recognize this. It is important to deliver value. It is important to deliver on time. Or let me just say, to deliver at the consumer's time, and to deliver what is promised. So I'm pretty much sort of done with this perspective. Clearly the future of shopping is digital, and you can actually go online and see what's happening in other parts of the world. It is incredible how speedily organized retail is truly getting thwarted by the convenience, the choice, and the value of digital shopping across the world, bar none. We are late to the game, but that's for a variety of reasons. But we can see us reaching that tipping point where, and frankly, categories have started to sort of see the shift. There were brands that we were talking to 7 years back who wouldn't consider digital shopping. They sort of posed all kinds of questions and issues. They're embracing it. There are brands, for example, you may have seen Motorola actually launching phones exclusively through Flipkart. But they're not available elsewhere. You want to buy that product, you have to go online, and you have to go to Flipkart and buy that product. There are brands with HomeShop 18 who create products exclusively for us, apart from everything else that we see. And this future is going to happen as the ecosystem starts putting the investments together in infrastructure, technology, and people. And we need to deliver those. Growth is a given. Thank you.